It's a political earthquake that could have huge implications for Democrats in the fall midterms. Voters in liberal San Francisco ousting by overwhelming margins 3 school board members in the wake of widespread backlash over the slow reopening of schools shut down by COVID and a controversial plan to rename dozens of schools, including schools named after Abraham Lincoln and George Washington. Furious parents launched the recall effort after arguing the school board was pushing progressive politics instead of acting in the best interests of children. And today's New York Post cover says it all: the woke revolt. Jillian, your thoughts?
I would say this, Emily, on the political front here, we're 9 days out from State of the Union, about 9 months, if my math serves me correct, which it probably doesn't, 9 months from the midterm. So this is why we're seeing all the political strategists now predict that politicians are going to start loosening COVID-related restrictions in schools. We're going to start to see a turning of the tides here. It's so that politicians can gain, the benefit of all that goodwill going into their reelection battles. Partially, that's what we're seeing here with this one school, the politicization of education. It's not something, by the way, that is being sort of ginned up by Republicans and thrust into the political spotlight. The reason education has become the center of great contention in this country over the past year or so is because education policies relating to COVID and relating to actual curriculums and CRT have become so wildly out of step with what the majority of Americans want to see. Right. When we hear criticism, that this is sort of a cultural issue that is being ginned up by Republicans, it strikes me as mighty disingenuous.
Right, and that's part of the argument, Richard, of the parents there in San Francisco. So they're in the San Francisco Public School District. They have an average math proficiency of 50%. This was just out 5 days ago. Reading proficiency as well in the 50s. So the parents are arguing, look, before you put lipstick on a pig, why don't you work on educating our children and making them career and college ready, which seems to be massively failing there in the Bay Area?
Well, listen, I think there's two narratives afoot here. I think there's a narrative that's happening in San Francisco, and I think there's a narrative that's happening in other school boards across the country. I think what you have in San Francisco is this. I think you have the odd bedfellows of political money, as well as parents who are angry, and they're not angry about the normal things that you sort of see populating the news cycle. They're not angry about books in schools. They're not angry about critical race theory. They're actually having a conversation about equity and how we make sure that schools are equitable, and they feel like these 3 particular board members are not on the side of equity, and they'd rather spend time renaming schools than actually dealing with the issues that matter to parents, which is how do we create equitable learning for all students. Now, with that being said, I think what you have happening around the country is a conversation about how we deal with public education. And I've always said this, and I'll continue to say this. I think before we sort of jump to conclusions on where the majority of Americans stand, I think it's really important that all parents, no matter their race or their color, have a say in what happens in our nation's public schools. And I think oftentimes missing from this conversation has been parents of color, right? Because parents of color are saying it's important that we teach a fullness and richness of our history. It's important that there are books in the library that represent different points of view and different authors. It's important that we have conversations around equity and making sure that all schools are properly funded and have school nurses and school counselors and social workers that are necessary for kids to deal with their lived reality. And I think that's the conversation that we should be having as a country, and how we center that over the political noise is easier said than done.
Right, and interesting, so you brought up California. So there in California, Kaylee, taking a bird's eye view for a second, interestingly, polls have been showing Biden is losing support in California, with 48% disapproving of his job performance. As well, Vice President Harris, who's from there, or was born there, I should say, isn't doing any better, right? Only 38% approve and 46% disapprove. So generally, what do you make about the fact that Democrats are now turning their backs on those policies and their party potentially?
Yeah, Democrats are fiddling while Rome burns. They have an undying, maniacal obsession with President Donald Trump. Go on CNN's website any given day, there's like 10 headlines about Donald Trump and nothing about education. But they have this obsession with him while all of these fires are going on in their backyard. And it's not just San Francisco, which is extraordinary. They were recalled anywhere between 74 to 78%. And they blame this on closet Republicans, but Republicans make up just 6% of registered voters in San Francisco. And it's not cabin to San Francisco. Go over to Virginia. Virginia. The #1 issue to Virginia voters, according to the Emerson poll, was education. Terry McAuliffe had a 33% lead on education in September, and within 40 days, you have Glenn Youngkin, who came in and said, hey, I'm positing something different here. No critical race theory, open our schools, no mask mandates for children. He ended up with a 9-point lead in education. So, Democrats continue to fiddle. Your backyard's on fire.
Also,
And
Kaylee, these people did not get voted out by small margins.
Right.
The margins were like between 72 and 79%, I think. I mean,
yeah, that's why I said it was overwhelming
lie.
margins in the intro, absolutely. And Cheryl, to Kaylee's point, Youngkin's sort of one of his slogans, or I should say commitments, was I will listen to parents. So sort of wrapping up this whole conversation, the concept is that parents want to be heard and they want to have a vital participatory role in their child's education, as all of us are saying, but it's up to the elected officials whether in fact they do listen to them and give them that voice.
Well, if they don't listen, they're going to be voted out of office. This is a midterm year. I think Democrats across the country should be watching what's happening in Virginia and in San Francisco. I mean, the elephant in the room, this was San Francisco. 6% of voters in San Francisco are Republicans. I mean, this is the type of environment now that Republicans are facing. And I'm sorry, but the gaslighting has to end. Otherwise, people are going to vote and they're going to get rid of these politicians. Again, the 79% for Allison Collins, 75% Gabriela Lopez, Fauna Molina, 72%. Those are the exact percentages. It was overwhelming. These people were taken out of that school board because they wanted to rename schools. And frankly, the parents are sick of the COVID restrictions, which we've seen enough with the masks across the country.
Yeah,
and I
exactly
think Cheryl
right.
brings up a good point here, and I want to double down on that because I think there's parents beyond just the mask mandates. I think for a long time we've seen parents, especially in a lot of urban centers, talk about their disdain for standardized testing and the fact that these kids are learning how to bubble instead of learning how to do algebra. And I think when Governor DeSantis and the Chicago Teachers Union can agree that we have a problem with standardized testing in this country, it tells you that there's some changing happening in the world of public education.
Yeah, there certainly are.